Is there further debate? The gentleman from District 22.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in debating the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you. I would like to first start off by saying, as a freshman, what a wonderful opportunity to sit here with you good ladies and gentlemen. I've not heard any personal attacks on anybody. I've heard concern for our state. That's all. Concern for the state. It's a neat opportunity for me to be involved in this. I would like to discuss a few points of things that I spent a lot of time preparing these notes, so I would like to maybe at least use them, even though it won't change anybody's opinion, I would imagine, and it will delay the process, but I spent a lot of time, so I'm going to go ahead and share some of this information that I ascertained. The
Don't
question
apologize.
we have before here...
You don't need to apologize. We're here till we're done.
The question we have here is House Bill 248. It's been suggested maybe that this is a vote on PPACA. It's been suggested that this is a vote only between a state and a federal exchange. You could even make the argument this is only about House Bill 248, because that's really all it is, 248, nothing else. I reject the idea that if I vote no on this, that I'm voting yes for a federal exchange. This is on House Bill 248. That's all we're talking about right now. And with House Bill 248, I've got some issues, or I've got some concerns about it. One of the things that I find discerning is that this bill does zero to improve the health care in our state. It does nothing to reduce the costs of health care. Everybody knows that this is going to increase the costs. I won't spend much time on the legislative oversight. I think that if we really wanted to have legislative oversight on this state exchange, that we could. I don't think that this is really addressing that issue. I would like to talk about the severability a little bit on this. We've touched on these things as far as lawsuits that are currently sitting out there. There's a handful of them. There's more being added all the time. But one in particular is the Oklahoma lawsuit. We talked a little bit about that. That lawsuit in particular is addressing whether or not the federally mandated penalties on employers and individuals can be assessed in a federal exchange. That's the question. So if the Supreme Court rules that they can't, because that's how the bill is actually written, nothing changes with our state exchange if it is passed. The question before them is if federal exchanges can mandate those penalties. As a state exchange, that would not apply to us. We don't have any get-out-of-jail-free clause there in our bill, in House Bill 248, 41-6105, subsection 2, subsection I, does not address this outcome. It only states that items that are specifically addressed by the Supreme Court then would be null and void. And as a state exchange, that wouldn't apply to us. Let me talk a little bit about flexibility and control. As of March 7th, we know that 26 states have elected not to implement a state exchange. We forget sometimes that seven states have opted for a partnership, which can be classified as a federal exchange. So if you do the numbers on that, that's 33 states that have said no to a state exchange, leaving only 16 that have elected to do a state exchange. I've read a lot of the reasons on why those states rejected a state exchange, and I won't bore you with all the details, but I will summarize some of the points that were made in the letters indicating why they didn't. One governor pointed out that the states do not have flexibility to manage and respond to the unique needs of their citizens, irrespective of who ran the exchange. Another governor indicated that there wasn't any real difference between a federal exchange and a state exchange. He continued to state that a federal government would make all of the important and critical decisions, and that the state was nothing more than an administrator. Another went on to say that because states do not have meaningful flexibility under a state exchange, that the states will end up bearing the brunt of any public dissatisfaction with the program, while the federal government, who created this situation in the first place, will be immune from the criticism. I've got a bunch more of summaries of what they said, but I'll just leave it at that. In my research, I can't believe that they were all wrong in their assessments as far as the flexibility and the control associated with that. The other issue I have is the cost. It's been well articulated by those in favor of this bill that we don't know the costs. What we do know is it's going to cost a lot more than what we currently have. Even the Congressional Budget Office estimated that with state exchange, they will see an additional, and that's additional, not just marking up because of the PPACA requirements, but an additional 10 to 13% on the state exchange. It's one more level of bureaucracy. See, the federal government's already created their bureaucracy like everybody has mentioned. Now we're just creating another one. So it's going to require another level there. In the governor's letters that rejected a state exchange, many of them also cited cost as one of the prevailing reasonings. Furthermore, when we talk about cost, I often hear we talk about federal money. We say, well, the startup is going to be federal money, and so that's not ours. It's not us. That's a little disheartening for me to hear that being discussed that way. There is no federal money. There's only your money, my money, and every other citizen's money out there. Any debt that goes into increasing that cost is going to be ours. It's mine, it's yours, it's your grandkids, it's everybody's. I don't like the fact when we say this country has a spending problem, and we complain all the time about how money is spent, but we get a little bit of money thrown towards our direction, and what do we say? Yep, we're good, we'll take it. And I don't like that. Final issue I have with regards to cost is simply that we don't know. We don't know how we're going to pay for our navigators yet. We don't have a contingency plan if the costs exceed what we expected. We don't even have that plan yet. It doesn't exist. We're going to develop one later. So that makes me a little nervous there. And my final reason for voting no on House Bill 248 has to do with being in a hurry. And we talk about the DEQ. I used to work with a lot with the DEQ in my former life. Spent a lot of time working with them, and I understand that organization pretty well. I also work directly with the EPA. The reason being is the state of Idaho does not have primacy over all EPA programs out there. We've picked and we've chosen, and we've taken those aspects as they've come along after we've evaluated them, after we've determined whether or not it's a good program or a bad program, and then we've gone ahead and implemented those. Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, our Stormwater Protection Plan right now, we don't do. It's just one of those things we haven't gotten around to yet. The state of Idaho hasn't taken the initiative to become a state OSHA program yet either. Whether we do that or not, that's up to us. That's great, because those are decisions that take a while to figure out. We made those decisions after we found out what our options were. We saw what it looked like. We studied, we learned, we said, you know what, we think we can do better. I don't think that's a bad approach to be able to do that. That reminds me of when I went hiking once with a bunch of Boy Scouts. And we were up in some wilderness area, and we were traveling along a river, and I'd love to be able to tell you where that was, but I don't know. We go on a lot of those things, and I'm usually just asked to tag along, and I do that. So I get in the car, and I go where they point me, and I show up and put on my backpack, and I go. But we were along the banks of this river, and it was fairly steep, where we got up a little bit higher up into the hill, And it was steep enough that you couldn't really, you didn't want to fall down the edge, because there was the river down there, another 75 feet down below. Up above, we had the bushes so thick that you couldn't move that way. So it was essentially a single file line. We had a dozen Boy Scouts there. And this trail was pretty tight. There's only one way to go, and we were going that way. And as I was walking along, I noticed that there was some bear scat on that road. You looked at it and you thought, huh, it's interesting. And as we continued on down the path, we saw more and more of this, and it was fresher and fresher. And we finally rounded a corner, and there was a bear, a dozen feet or so in front of us. And I think we scared him just as much as he scared us. And I was the only one that was armed at the time, and so I was summoned to the front and asked to stand there. And so I came up to the front, and we stood there. It was a little bit difficult task trying to get around everybody, but I got there, and I promised, Speaker, that I will get to the point here, and I appreciate your indulgence. But as I got there, I stood there, and the bear had gone around the corner, and it was a blind corner we couldn't see. And we stood there for a little bit, and we thought, what should we do? Should we turn around and go the other way? Or should we move forward? We thought about it for a while, and we thought, well, let's just go ahead and move forward a little bit, and we did. And if we didn't chase that bear for another half mile down the creek, you know, it was making me a little nervous, because eventually I thought that bear's going to get tired of me pushing him. He's going to come back and get us. But turned out fine. The Boy Scouts all made it back, much to the chagrin of some of their parents. But my point is that when we saw that problem, we couldn't go backwards. We couldn't go to the left. We couldn't go to the right. We were stuck. And I feel like that's how we are right now. We don't have much options. That's been mentioned by just about everybody, that we kind of in a bad situation here. But I think the wisest thing to do was to wait, give that bear a little bit of chance to get on around the corner, so we didn't run onto him again. We don't even know if there's a bear around the corner with this, Bill. Maybe there's not. Maybe I'm reading a lot into this, that there's really not a problem. Maybe that's the issue. And I hope that's the case. But maybe there is a bear around that corner. And I really think it'd be wise for us to just take a minute, stand on that trail, take a deep breath, and come back and look at this with fresh set of eyes. In conclusion, I am reminded again of the federal mandates that's been discussed so many times. We talk about the wolves. That is a little bit different of a situation. We didn't ask for the wolves. We weren't given an option if we wanted to manage the wolves ourselves. We had to go out and get that. That wasn't part of the Endangered Species Act, unlike the EPA, where they allow for state management. But we ended up with wolves. They came into the state. We were given federal money to help manage and address that problem with the wolves. Not too long afterwards, we had lots of wolves, and we had no money. I'm afraid that our health exchange system that we're voluntarily accepting here is just a wolf in a surgical smock, and we're going to be left with no money to end. It is with the utmost respect that I suggest to you, members of this body, that maybe you agreed with one little thing that I had to say there. And if you did, then maybe you should vote no with me on that. And I hope you will vote no. Thank you.